Hello, hello, you most beautiful stars. Hello, hello. I started getting a little nervous because it was just doing the spinny thing, and we are live. Welcome, welcome. This is Stars of the Morning Light. I am Courtney, the host. Um, it's 9 p.m. for this Edgar Cayce life skill study. Please know that I pretty much go live sometime on a Wednesday for Edgar Cayce Life Skill Studies. So why don't you right now, if you're new, welcome. If you haven't been catching me lately, go and hit that subscribe just to make sure and ring that bell just to make sure you're getting the notifications, especially for Wednesdays, because you never know when the spirit's going to start moving me and I'm going to jump on this thing to talk to you about Edgar Cayce. And I see that Seeker of Truth is in the chat along with Kim. Good to see you. Um, do know that if I start having a little bit of computer problems, it's because of the storms. They are not necessarily here yet with myself here in northern Georgia. Um, and if they do somehow affect me recording with Lucky on Friday, because Lucky Stone 888 and I either pre-record to air it here on Friday night and or live with him on his channel. I'm still working towards my 50 more subs. So come on, folks, hit that sub button, please. Um, I think a lot of us here in the States have seen what is going to be going on with Florida all the way up into Georgia. It is almost unprecedented to have a hurricane go all the way to Atlanta. I guess it'll only be like a one on the Richter scale of hurricane, but that's still a hurricane over Atlanta, Georgia. I am north of that. I'm actually at the Tennessee Georgia border, but what they are telling us is because we're a valley, I am surrounded by mountains, lots of mountains. I have the Appalachia, I have Single Mountain, Eagle. I mean, so many mountains, folks, that we are going to be looking at massive flooding issues. So, and that's going to most likely start with us tomorrow. So please just, if I'm not here, it's not because I don't love you. And if I'm not here, pray for me. I love prayers. And please, 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 no matter where you're listening right now, I do have subscribers in Florida, beautiful friends in Florida and Southern Georgia. Please send out all that good, positive energy, love, light, prayers, however you want to do it, to definitely Florida. Please, please, please do that, folks. I think we're fixing to see something we haven't seen in about a decade. So, um, we pray for them. Okay, Centurion Sun said that they're right in the path right now. Okay, beautiful. Well, we're going to send you some love and light. Here's a little trick before we get into the Edgar Cayce. The patrons of Stars of the Morning Light have learned how to use pyramids really well, but anyone can. Anyone can. So, Centurion Sun, um, you can, anyone who's in the path right now. I will be tomorrow. Oh Lord, I'm gonna put it up tonight big time and tomorrow and probably for a few days. You can imagine a beautiful glowing pyramid over your house, over your apartment complex, over your neighborhood, over your town. Just start small and keep building, keep bringing those four corners out with this beautiful glowing pyramid because energetically it can deter possible negative consequences, even if it's weather. And I'm not saying I'm not gonna experience the rain or I'm not gonna experience probably tree limbs and whatnot, but I mean damaging things, it can deter that. And I do it with every storm. Everything, we're looking at possible lots of tornadoes. Unfortunately, folks in I believe South Carolina and North Carolina have already experienced tornadoes. So Please, world, pray, send light, send love. Those who might be in the path, pyramids do help to protect. Pyramid power is good for protection from all things, period. It's the best tool I have ever learned how to use. So, oh, Kim said her daughter has 2 houses in Florida. Yeah. Without I'm not trying to be negative here, but I did talk at the beginning of this year that we would start seeing more and more, you know, natural disasters in a way. It is for a good reason, but difficult to go through. But remember, we are better together. We're stronger together. We can persevere. Us humans, we've been doing this a long time. We have seen stuff like this over and over again as we now begin to talk about reincarnation with our new book with Edgar Cayce. So do know innately within all of us, we know how to be there for ourselves and help others when natural disasters happen. We do. We know what to do. I know we're better than what the little box here portrays. I know that. And maybe tonight you can get a little encouragement and know that you too have all that you need within you. Because we are starting a new book, folks. Edgar Cayce on reincarnation. Now, this is, as I hold the book up, this is the actual 1967 copy. It's when it was first in print in 1967, and down here, if I can hold it up without the glare, it says $2.95. $2.95. Oh my goodness, in 1967, which I gotta say is kind of a lot in 1967. It's because it was a specialty book. It was Edgar Cayce. That was kind of quite a lot in 1967. But this is an original copy. With that being said, now, as everyone who has been here with me for a while at Stars of the Morning Light, um, I am very keen on not plagiarizing anyone. I'm very keen on that, probably because it's my love in life is writing and I don't know, not stealing other people's stuff. So, even though the copyright only says like all rights reserved, I am still applying that to all forms of media, all forms of reproduction. So I will read excerpts and I will retell lovely as I am a storyteller, but I am not going to read word for word. What I will tell you folks is this book is written so much more lovely and smoother and delightful than the last that we were going through. Um, and I think it's going to be a fun time. I really do. I think we're going to learn a lot. I think reincarnation is a topic that can never end, right? As long as we keep going back, that's going to be a hot topic. So, I think it's worth our while. So I appreciate all of you that months and months and months ago when I put a poll out there as to which is going to be our next book, um the majority of you chose Reincarnation from the 4 different books I put out there. So this is for y'all. This is definitely for y'all. So happy Wednesday, everybody. I hope everyone's feeling good. I see a happy hippie in the chat right now, too. She's down here in Georgia with me. We're going to send her love and light as well. So all of her property is protected and held well for the next few days. So the beginning of this, like the prologue and whatnot, is mostly history. And a little bit of chapter 1 is a little bit of history too, as in Edgar's bio. Well, we're already covering Edgar's bio. If you're new here and you don't know, when I'm live on Wednesdays doing Edgar Cayce Life Skill Studies, I'm either going to be discussing his biography and or in one of his source books, okay, one of his materials. Either or, because both go together. One's life is their story, and we learn so much about his readings about other people's stories. So the both work together. All right, folks, we are in chapter 1. Have I lived before? In 1923, as we're not there yet in his biography, I do want to put this there. In 1923, another gentleman, as we've learned, a lot of gentlemen were finding out about Edgar's talents and started, trying to do readings. Where we are in the biography right now is that committee of men who started working with Edgar, to follow his readings and be with him. Well, in 1923, so we in the biography shows right now are in like 1905 or so. So this is like 20 years later from where we are in the biography. This man named Lammers was working with Cayce, and Lammers was one of the first, I really want to say one of the first, to start asking questions that were more related to the occult than to like medical stuff. So think about that. Edgar, we are just at the beginning of when he really starts accepting, okay, I'm going to be doing readings for people. But he did want to keep it based a lot on medical. Now, in the last biography, there was a little bit of kernels of other stuff coming out, but not as much as in this case. So in 1923 is when Lammers asked Edgar Cayce, when he was in his like hypnotic, deep meditative state, speaking to the Akashic, communicating that way, what about reincarnation? And I do want to remind everyone that Edgar, throughout his whole life, was a devoted Christian. At this time, when Lammers asked that, and there was a big response as to yes, with a big Y, a very big YES. Yes, you humans come back. You do it again and again. When Edgar got out of his trance-like state and they were reading his words back to him, please know that that was absolutely disturbing to Edgar Cayce because he very much took the Bible verbatim. That every word there, as they still teach today, is the word of God. And so everything in there is completely accurate and completely trustworthy. Well, they teach that you got one shot. So you better do it right, that one shot, because you're either going to do heaven or hell, right? So imagine believing that, growing up with that, that is your faith. You teach Sunday school, you wanted to be a pastor, and then all of a sudden, this gift that you have that it took a long time to accept just revealed a very, very contradictory idea, concept. It did take Edgar a moment. I mean, I can just imagine him laying on the couch because he would lay on a couch and he would put his arms over his body, like over his chest, like this. Think of like Wednesday Addams when she'd be sleeping like this. And he would go into his deep meditative trance. And now imagine coming out of that, kind of coming to, They read your words back to you, and it just blew up everything you ever thought. I can imagine Casey went outside and he was a smoker of cigarettes. I can just imagine Casey on the front stoop, front deck of his whatever house they were in and just chain smoking and shaking his head and not being able to handle it. He did eventually kind of conquer his fears and allowed Lammers to continue to ask questions, and then even more so, questions about reincarnation, because now we got to investigate, right? We have to investigate to learn, how does this even all come together? And that's what a lot of this book is going to explain to us. Okay? So, that's a little image imagery of the day Edgar learned this. I mean, bless his heart, right? As I would say in a good, loving way in the South. Really bless him. Do know that then Edgar went on to doing over 2,500 reincarnation past life readings for people. He went from, it's not even a thing, doesn't happen, to serving over 2,500 people. So let's talk about how that service goes. I saw that I Infinity came in. I am Infinity. Good to see you, my dear. Before actually, on the note of service, I think that's where I want to start, just for a moment. On the note of service. I really do. Because that's what it's all about, everyone. I want to be a little truthful, a little forthcoming with you. For since Monday, I think because of the storms, whenever something's going on in the earth or with the earth and planetary, I know y'all are feeling it. I've been a little cranky in my head, and it was more based on, there's been too many things in my life that are getting in the way of me being of service to others. Huh. But yet my job, in many ways, is service to others. Oh, so much within me is changing. Um, the patrons of Stars of the Morning Light know a lot about that. And so I have been, I'm going to admit, and it was just tonight that everything kind of smoothed out, as in, well, if you still have obligations, if you still have life, right? All the life things, responsibilities, as my teacher would say, response slash ability. So I do have the ability to respond to all things, right? I finally tonight was able to free myself of some of the mental toil or trouble that was going on about not having enough opportunity to be of service for others, essentially by doing service for others. How weird of a country. But that is because I understand what it's all about, folks. I really do. And I'm going to read you a quick little, where is it? Um, I did make some notes as to where I was going. This is from Edgar. On that note, Edgar thought that all human natures have one thing in common. They are only operating at full potential when their concerns are directed away from self preoccupation and towards the assistance of their less fortunate brothers. They're only operating at their full potential when they're less focused on their or their self preoccupation and towards the assistance of their less fortunate brothers. So, service, folks, service. And what else did he say? From the lips of Edgar in one of his readings, so from the Akashic, keep the law. It is befitting a man's relation to God. Keep self unspotted from the world, not as eye service, but as service to the heart of the Maker. And when I read that, often when you read Edgar's readings, because of the dialect of either the writer of 1967 or his readings of the time and how the Akashic spoke and or just the dialect of the turn of the century, it is so eloquent in its speech and written word that I was thinking about today, as in today's world. And why we started this whole series was to bring everything he did and said and experienced and learned and shared with others 100 years forward. And for us to read this right now, keep self unspotted from the world, not as eye service, but as service of the heart of the Maker. Not as eye service. Eye service, as in you're seeing me right now. I surely do not look like eye candy right now on a late Wednesday night with y'all. I know the difference. But that was being said in 1920 something. Hmm. And now we're in 2020 something. And it appears that everybody is out there doing some eye service, trying to obtain the eye service. And it said, be unspotted by the world. Hmm. I don't know if we followed that, folks. I don't know if we followed that. It is what it is. It is what it is. That's why I'm here going through all this with y'all. Spending my lovely Wednesday with you. Of course. All right, so let's get back to the beginning. Big ol' yes. Reincarnation. It's a thing. It's what we do. It's what we do, right? So I do want to I want to read this because it was really great and it'll lead me into the next thing for it. This is talking about Edgar's fear. His first fear was that his subconscious faculties had suddenly been rendered by the forces of evil, making him more making him an unwitting tool, sorry. And he had always vowed that if ever his clairvoyant powers were to play him false, he would permanent no further use of them. That goes into secrets of the universe and how to use them. We just finished on that, folks. That goes to the last book we just read about how the subconscious plays into so much of connecting with the Akashic. A lot of people in today's world will talk about how the subconscious will, play into connecting with your higher self. Do note, as we discussed in the secrets of the universe and how to use them, it's in the playlist under Edgar Cayce studies. He spoke about if the subconscious gets hijacked by whatever, all of the subliminal messages, all of the influences, whatever influences, if it is not a pure, clean conduit, then we retreat. We retreat. We do not trust what is going on there. So when he first learned about reincarnation, that was his first thought. Something has hijacked my subconscious. I can't use my clairvoyance anymore. I can't use what now people think is like, you know, all the pituitary glands and all the stuff, right? He's like, I can't use any of it. Not the case. Not the case, as we know, but that was his first thought. And it tied into the last book. And it also tied into the example we're going to give as to how he did one of his past life readings. Before we get into the example of David Greenwood, I want to bring up not just that topic of how he connected with someone's past lives, but also the yes. Why is it important to even know about our past lives? What does it matter? We're living right now. What's it matter? I wonder if any of us could really, if I just pause there, does it matter if you know what you did or did not do in past lives? Edgar really didn't know for a while until he really understood what was being said. An example that we're going to give is a 14-year-old boy, David Greenwood. Before this, though, they only matter, as I'm about to read to you, if you take that information really into yourself. Now, any of you that are in the chat or listening, you can leave a comment below. Any of you that have ever had an Akashic reading to me, it is mostly some form of counsel. It is mostly some form of advice. It is mostly what should you be doing, right? Because the Akashic does not care about things the way we do. So, as I have spoken before, even knowing about your past lives only matters if you actually use the evidence to study it and the counsel that is attached to it. It's the only reason. Hence, back to that service. And usually, when we're serving others, we're serving ourselves, right? So it's only that. I'm going to read a little something from page 16, and then I'll jump to a little bit of 17 and 18. And I do want to say, many of you that have been with me for a while, I have said a few times, I'd rather do what I refer to as a karmic timeline cleanse, where I remove a lot of negativity from past lives that influence and affect this life, right? The reason why I'd rather do that as a service to others is because then it's removed. It's gone. It's not up to myself or the fellow human to decide to take the counsel or not. Because many times with readings, as we're going to learn with David Greenwood, counsel goes without anyone paying attention to it. And without that, without the, okay, this is why, this is how, and this is why the influences are here, what you can do with them, right? Then it's no good. It's literally no good. You're kind of wasting your money if you're asking me. So that's why I often say I'd rather do a karmic timeline cleanse for others because then it's not up to the fellow human that I just served to even make a decision if they're going to or not going to use their gifts and talents and skills appropriately. It's not up to them. All the negativity and karma is gone that is influencing this life. Big key theme for tonight. Hmm. Which, once that negativity is gone, it's also gone from your subconscious. Speaking of the subconscious, let's read a moment here. So, this will be the case of David Greenwood. Before I jump into that, though, I want to talk about how Edgar did it. So he goes under, whoever is running the session speaks the questions. Remember, there's always got to be some questions, but there's a pause. I'm going to read. A pause followed, during which Edgar's subconscious made contact with the subconscious of David Greenwood. Had this reading been only concerned with the physical health of the subject, it would have been imperative that Edgar be told the exact geographical location of the boy at the moment, just as tracking a station must know. So, if it was physical, like what's medically wrong, Edgar did need the exact location. But because it was a past life reading, Edgar connected his subconscious to David's subconscious. I'm going to keep I'm going to jump to page 17 for a moment. Just stay with that, please, for a second. Think about that. This is why so much of the book of the secrets of the universe and how to use them talks so much about the subconscious. And unfortunately, our lovely subconscious gets bombarded day in and day out with hundreds and thousands of subliminal messages. So, how can it become a pure conduit to communicate with one another? I'm going to keep reading. It should be noted that the reading occasionally employs caution, and for a very good reason. The subconscious mind of Edgar Cayce seemed to be dealing with the colonial French. We're going to get to David's story here in a minute. It's a good one. So, Edgar is viewing David in a past life of the 17th century France. I want to point out the caution. Let me explain. Which it must then have transposed into the modern English idioms of his conscious mind. I'm going to keep reading. The subconscious does not consist of tangible matter, only thought exists. Therefore, all languages are one. The danger of misinterpretation could only begin when Edgar spoke aloud. Thus his pet- uh, thus his concern. Once he had successfully transferred the mental pictures from his subconscious to the teletype of his conscious mind, was was to retain the true original sense. This care and caution become more and more evident as Edgar receded further and further back in time with David Greenwood's past lives and was confronted not only by absolute idiom and languages, but languages which made muscular demands on his throat and lip muscles, which his own would have been totally incapable of reproducing. Here, his task was not so much to translate from one language to another as to paraphrase unintangible symbols into their nearest modern equivalent. In short, he had to crack the code, much as archaeologists have done to reduce ancient sign languages to their approximate grammatical equivalents. A lot was said there. And you know what? I'm going to use someone in the chat. Thank you for being present. Lovely Miss Robin, a happy hippie. Love her. I really do. I do love Robin. Um, if I ever do a reading for Robin, I have to remember now to not try to crack the code as much because often she is an herbalist, folks. She's a wonderful herbalist, jewelry maker, wonderful products, a happy hippie, holistic. Oftentimes in one of her readings, they're going to be showing me some plants and trees and stuff. I do not know biology. I'm lucky if I don't know that stuff. So they're showing me all this stuff. They might give me the word, but then I'll be like, I don't think so. I don't think that's what that looks like. I don't think. And so it's like I go back and forth with the Akashic talking about, I don't know if that plant can even grow here in Georgia. Why are you bringing that? And so I have learned with definitely Miss Robin's readings that I have to step out of the way because I don't know enough about biology and plants and botany and anything that grows, really. I don't know enough for me to try to crack that code. So now I just have to deliver the code. Whatever they say, I have to deliver it with no argument, no nothing, but no nothing, because I don't know what I'm really looking at. Do know that when I do ones for like past lives, which some of you might have experienced in the chat or listening, I'm gonna be seeing you. Not you, but like what you look like. If you were a male, if you were a female, what was going on. I'm going to be seeing it. And beings of the Akashic might kind of guide me to things, might explain some stuff to me. But I'm gonna need a minute for definitely as we're gonna learn, the further you go back, the more I often in readings go, like, I need a minute. Like, where am I? What time frame is this possibly that I can convey to someone? This is how I know that our quote unquote timelines are, yes, our proposed time frame of people, places, and things throughout history is way jacked up because I've witnessed it. It is. It's all messed up what they're presenting. But then even makes it harder for me to then deliver that to you, right? Even to the language. I think I've done readings for Shelley, Seeker of Truth, that I think I might have just said, yeah, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that. Like literally my lips and my throat, my tongue are not going to be able to do it. And I also want to bring you guys back to the laryngitis that Edgar experiences, and so do I. It is different when it's not just the frequency, it's not just the energy. What we are doing to communicate this is not also easy on the body. It's just not. It's not on the brain, the body, the eyes, all of it. This is why Edgar, as they also mentioned, literally in chapter 1, and myself, there's times that we could literally fall asleep and sleep for 3 or 4 days straight. I've had that since a child. Edgar, the majority of his life, he could fall asleep and sleep for 3 or 4 days straight. Not waking up, you're not eating, you're not anything. There might be, like, 2 trips to the bathroom within that, 3 or 4 day span. You're not anything. It's like your whole physical system, if this is kind of like a computer system, overload, shut down, unplug, you're out, right? We have to do things like that. And if we don't get things like that, then we can start becoming very ill. It does affect a lot of stuff doing readings, trying to convey the message to others. And imagine that in today's world too, and I'm not speaking about anyone in the chat, nor probably any of you listening, but imagine in today's world where big concepts, broad sense of history has eluded most of the population. So how do you then convey information to others? It is a tricky thing to do, folks. Um, and also, fun fact, I didn't know if y'all knew this, but your lips and your tongue and your throat form to the shape of your dialect. Like the shape of everything forms to the dialect that you grew up with. So I grew up in Chicagoland. My accent used to be much thicker than it is now. I mean, very Chicago. So Chicago is very like long O's, A's. Our throat is more constructed to do that. Our tongues, most Chicago people, they have very short, fat tongues because of how it has to move and hit the top of the roof of the mouth and all sorts of stuff to create that accent. And the only reason I know this is when I took Arabic, the teacher she looked in everybody's mouth to see if they were going to be able to do it. And there were 2 people in class, I was one of them, that she went, "Oh, I don't think you're going to be able to do this." And I just looked at her and I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because your mouth is clearly Chicago." What she wanted to say is your mouth was clearly blue collar Chicago, meaning the accent was real thick. So now imagine being a reader, an Akashic reader, and there are names coming out that you need to say. There's language, symbols, all sorts of stuff. It is not easy, folks, and I'm not complaining here. I'm trying to draw an understanding as to what it's like for Edgar, right? What it was like for Edgar. I mean, these poor people around him, they didn't know what was going on. At least because of him, we know now what's going on, right? So this poor guy, this poor guy. Oh, my heart goes out to Edgar. I do have a very big heart for Edgar Cayce. With that being said, remember his subconscious would link up with David Greenwood's subconscious. All right. So I thought that would be a little bit of fun facts that you guys would like. It's not the easiest to sit there and see everything. That part's actually really not easy. But to see everything and and then have to try to explain it. So I adore all of you who have ever been patient with me, who are reasonable with me, and all of you that take the advice and apply it. I've never known anyone who took any of the Akashic advice and applied it who then turned to me and said, "Oh, that was the worst thing that ever happened. I should have never taken that advice." That I can tell you has never happened. There's been a whole lot of people that don't take the advice, though, the counsel. David Greenwood was one of them. So, this is the story of David Greenwood as we're going to expose reincarnation, at least in chapter 1. All right. So, David was actually a 14-year-old boy at the time, and this was 1927. So, Edgar in 1923 learned about reincarnation. By 1927, he's in full effect doing readings for a bunch of people. David's sister was much older. She actually had a reading from Cayce about her past lives. So she asked to do one for David. I don't think I marked it in this book, but it did state in the book that Edgar would only do readings for the individual asking for it, or if it was a guardian situation over a younger person. I'm so happy they put that in the book. It is all based on permission. You got to think David is going into, or Edgar's going into someone's subconscious, hooking up with somebody's subconscious. We don't do that without permission. I'm very, well, everybody knows how I feel about that. That is a code of conduct. And if the psychic is not following that code of conduct, my goodness, run, run, run. So his sister, though, did have the permission as she was much older. She took after her parents were still alive, but she was kind of a caretaker of David, and he was 14. So I will tell you, my cutoff is 14 for permission from parents or guardians. Anyone over 14, they must give permission themselves. Um, and I really don't like doing past life stuff until for teenagers. I just don't. They don't need it. They need a whole lot of life skills. They don't need past life skills. Anyways, um, so she did, or Edgar did the reading for David, a 14-year-old boy, in 1927. It was recorded. It was recorded. Do you know that? And given to his sister. So who was David Greenwood and his magnificent lives? Well, well. On page 16, that reading started, y'all are going to love this. That reading started with actually the Akashic telling them if he does not handle his diet, he's going to have digestive issues. And if he doesn't kind of get a handle on his quick temper, that's not going to suit him later in life either. The Akashic is more concerned with the now, what's going on now, than anything in the past. Because the now can change the future. So they started in the now. Yep, even though it was asked about the past, which many of you that have experienced readings, it goes that way. The Akashic will start with now. So they said that, hey, he will have digestive issues. He needs to fix his diet now. That quick temper is not going to suit him either. Well, then they went into the past lives. He was, and the one closest to this life that he was in 1927, he was some kind of, they started going into, he should be some kind of salesman, especially in materials or fabrics. Like that would suit him well. Well, then they brought them back to 17th century France when it was like Louis the 13th was king. He was a guy named Neil who somehow kind of moved up the ranks of the king's court and became the master of robes, meaning, like in our world, a fashion designer. Okay. And his name was Neil. We love this, right? So David of 1927 was Neil in, geez, I don't even know when that was, of France, 17th century France. That's what they jumped back to. I'm sure there was lives in between. We're going to keep going. Then they jumped to Greece, even further back, where it was a time period where like governments just kept kind of being overthrown, which we know Greece had some difficulties, right? And he somehow within that was able to develop great people skills. Like, as governments are doing shady stuff, being overthrown, probably stabbing people in the back. Come on, guys, Greece. Um, he's able to kind of network and learn how to play the game, people skills, but yet was still very focused on the common man as well. But with those people skills, he was able to move up also once all the dust settled. Very interesting. So great people skills, great fashion. Okay, so we get this. Then it went even further back to like way ancient Egypt when they were being evaded, at some point they were being invaded. This would have been, let me see if I got the right dates. Oh, I don't, hold on, I'm sorry, I'm missing a life, folks. Pause, I'm sorry. It went from France, 17th century, Greece, then to Alexander's invasion of Persia. Wow. Whatever invading power it was, it succeeded in dividing the country against itself. The boy's name was then Abel, and he took advantage of the times to rise to the status of court physician. So he, once again, learned how to communicate and move through the ranks to become the court physician. How that influenced this life was that he enjoyed studying like medical compounds, right? Chemical compounds. Sorry, I said medical compounds, chemical compounds. But the subconscious at some point disregarded that. Okay, hold on. We're going to go again now back. So, France, Greece, Persia. Now we're into Egypt. And this must have been, this had to have been, guys, they're thinking this was like 10,000 BC. Okay. So far back. From a humble beginning, he rose to authority as a type of lay preacher who enjoyed the trust of the common people. As a result, the priests of the new dynasty used him as a go between and general interpreter of the new form of worship. Hence, he was among the first in the land to take a special class of regiment or garment to distinguish himself from the other peoples. This entity, they didn't put the word human on him, by the way. When Edgar did readings, oftentimes the word entity would be used for human. Now, I do want to say, when I first started doing readings, that's how they spoke too. And I went, whoa. In today's world, I knew if I just said the word entity in regards to all you lovely people in the chat, y'all would have been like, what? You would have been like, why are you calling me an entity? So I, as the messenger, as the interpreter, started changing that to human. I mean, unless I'm talking about a different entity. But the Akashic refers to you all, you lovely humans, you beautiful stars, you brilliant lights. The Akashic refers to you as an entity. They always have. I call you humans. The entity gained in that experience and gained manifest in the present in his ability to apply himself to the masses as well as the individual. So again, in Egypt, people skills. Talk to the common man as good as you can talk to the king, the pharaoh, whomever. And then, y'all, it went back to Atlantis. Now, do know, Edgar, at this time, hadn't really touched on that topic. It went back to this guy, David Greenwood, 14-year-old boy, was in Atlantis. Before that, the entity was in the Atlantean land when the floods came and destruction ruled the land. Who was amongst those also destroyed? And then they gave the name of the boy. I am not going to try to pronounce that, as his name was in Atlantis. Most significantly, he was heir to the throne. So from his very beginnings, the blood of royalty was familiar to him. Despite his death by drowning, he had lived long enough to indicate that he lacked the discipline and dedication necessary to his station, but the present, within the evidence of reincarnation, is seen in the ability to know materials, especially those applying to wearing apparel. That's from the Akashic. Okay? So he was in Atlantis, next runner up to the throne. So royalty, quote unquote, was running through his blood. And how to be royal. But of course, the destruction of Atlantis happened, and he died with that. So we just went back in time with David Greenwood, 14-year-old boy. I'm going to start from Atlantis and work our way back, or work our way up again. So Atlantis, it just said that he came from royalty. He came from royalty, and he dressed to the nines in Atlantis because of it. Okay, got it. The next life that was spoken about was then what? Egypt. That when they were being invaded and things were happening, he still hung out with the commoners, but also worked his way into royalty per se, and at least a prestiged appointed position as a go between, as a priest to the people, as a messenger for the king, right? He was then awarded one of the most best garments in the land, let's say, into then the time period of Alexander invading Persia. Same scenario. Somehow he, with his people skills, his ability to meet the commoners where they're at and wine and dine with the best of them, he rose again. Okay. Then we're in Greece. Same story. Hmm. Then France. Pretty much the same story. Master of Robes. Hmm. And now he's David Greenwood, 14-year-old boy from middle of America, ain't doing much nothing. He did save up some money to support his, some of his hobbies and school books and whatnot from working at a newspaper. He was a newspaper boy, right? In 1927. Hmm. Before I go any further, I want to inform people that not all of your past lives, not all of them. Some of you have been here so many times, so many times. Not all of them are attached to influencing your current life. That's the point of David Greenwood right now. The Akashic presented the lives that are actually present in the energy field of David Greenwood that is supposed to be there to help him succeed in this life. I'm sorry if my camera's gone a little foggy, guys. So, what that means is not oftentimes, like with my karmic timeline cleanses, I'm cleaning up a bunch of bad stuff, but it might only be from 3 or 4 or 5 lives. And it is nasty, horrible stuff. But it's because I'm asking where is the negative energy that is influencing this current life? Let's get it out of there. Same with reincarnation, past life readings, right? There's only going to be, I don't know, a handful of lives that currently influence the life you have right now. As in your goals, your gifts, your talents, things to watch out for, things to pay attention to, right? Maybe your soul contracts that you're attached to. Well, maybe you've only had 5 or 6 lives with them, with a bunch of other lives sprinkled in between. Okay? So that is so with David Greenwood, right? With David Greenwood. And Shelly, I'll get to your question in just a minute, my dear. I'm gonna stay here because I might answer it. So with David Greenwood, all of those lives, we had an ongoing theme. A couple of them. I'm always looking for the theme in all of our past lives and all of our stories and everything. Probably the English teacher in me. There's themes, right? Most people call those karma. I literally call them themes, and oftentimes they're here to help us. So there's a couple of themes very strongly moving, right? In the 14-year-old David Greenwood. That is, man, does he know how to work with the people? High people, low people, all people, right? He is the quintessential salesman. Or, yeah, maybe a preacher or a television host. TV wasn't invented yet, right? That kind of thing. He would have been a game show host, I'm sure, this lovely David. And he knows fashion. He knows fashion big time. Wow, okay. He knows how to dress. He also probably knows how to dress others. He's got an eye for probably the colors, the patterns, the if it's gonna keep you warm, if it's not, he's probably just innately understands what all sorts of different people need as far as clothing. That's what the Akashic was trying to say. On top of, though, watch that digestive issue, which that 14-year-old young strapping David did not have that problem, which actually came from the influence of when he was in France, living it real good before, revolution, living real good. He ate horribly and destroyed his gut, ended up with a whole lot of issues when he was alive in France. Um, that energy traveled with him to young David Greenwood in the middle of the United States, hundreds of years later. That's a karmic timeline cleanse that I do. Quantum timeline cleanse, however you want to say it. I don't care. That's what I do, folks. I would have taken that negative energy from the actions and behaviors of the 17th century Neil in David's past life, gotten rid of all of that. So the energy of that did not transpose any longer to the living entity human of today. That is what I do. So it can be good influence, bad influence, right? Well, they wrote all this down, gave it to his sister. His sister went home. She did show it to her parents. And even though she had a lot of years on David, I mean, she was well into her 20s. The parents still had the right to say no. Oh, he's a 14-year-old boy. We don't even understand what this stuff is. We don't understand what you did. We don't understand these readings. What does this have to do with anything? So they did not allow her to talk to David about it or show David about the reading. Well, as time passed, David grew older and he still worked not as a newspaper delivery boy anymore, but now he worked in that newspaper factory. And David was so unhappy with life. And he also did start having digestive issues. So a decade later, folks, a decade later, his reading that Edgar did was in 1927. We are now in like 1937. A decade later, he's a 20-something-year-old man. He's having digestive issues. He is very unhappy because he's just working a newspaper line, machines. That's what David's doing. David Greenwood, with this rich history of that, it suits him best to be with the people. He's pushing papers. So he was so discouraged, so unhappy, so displeased with life, but now he's a grown man, right? Now he's a grown man. So the sister, who still had that information, that letter, that transcript of what Edgar read, explained it to David and gave it to him to read. Now, at first, David at first, he dismissed it, as all people do. They tend to, right? But then that digestive issue was getting worse and worse. And so his sister kept going, well, maybe you should change your diet, like Cayce said. And then she took it upon herself. This was such a great sister. Took it upon herself to set up a job interview for him with a clothing line for distribution sales. He actually was distributing, and selling band uniforms. Like, think high school band uniforms, military band uniforms. He got the job, and you know how he got the job? Somehow that sister brought up Edgar Cayce to the men, told the men all about David's past lives and how he's going to understand fashion more than he's aware of. He's going to be able to sell the heck out of whatever you got more than he's aware of. Please just hire my kid brother. David did not know she was even having this conversation. And I kid you not, because those men knew who Edgar Cayce was, they hired him without even meeting David. She basically went home and said, "Hey, David, you got a new job. They just need to meet you. Go get it. Get out of the newspaper factory." How impressive. And sure enough, folks, in like a year's time, David is rocking in sales, band uniforms. This has gotta be difficult. He's rocking in sales. He's skyrocketed to, like, one of their top salesmen, and he got, like, 3 more states of the Southern United States attached to his service area in a year. He also then, because he was loving life again, went, "Oh my goodness, I need to change my diet," like how Casey said. Changed his diet. His digestive was getting better. So now David Greenwood, young 20-year-old man, is feeling very good, on top of the world. He's able to be out there and meet so many people. He's on the train going to this city and that city and selling, and it's about fabric and clothing. He's loving life, right? And I'm sure we can imagine possibly the type of demeanor that this young 14-year-old boy might have had that intrigued his sister and inspired his sister to seek the service of Edgar in the first place in 1927. In today's world, probably that energy would be very acceptable. In 1927, not so much. And so he was willing to maybe drown himself in a factory. And the sister went, "No way. We're going to find out what's going on here." David did so good, but okay, the war is now here. We're reaching into 1941, 42, and David was going to join the army, and he did, but they had to, because the company he was working for anyways, as everyone knows in our World War II, especially here in the States and all over the place, companies were shutting down or doing other business. We were handling other business, right? So in that time period, he did join the military, but he was classified as a 4F, I think it is, meaning he could not do combat. So what he actually, the position they put David in was distributing the men's uniforms. Like if you needed a uniform, if you needed boots, if you needed, he had his tape measure and everything he needed to make sure you were, and so he was handling a great deal of distribution of military uniforms to the men because those were his skills. He got a 4F non-combat position because of that digestive issue. It was still present. Like he wouldn't have been able, kind of like, flat foot, ulcers. There were a lot of conditions, but there were still opportunities for men to serve and women and women. So he did that. right? During the war. And post the war, that company, that fashion line or that clothing company, then did what everybody else did in the 1950s, opened up big department stores instead of door-to-door sales, and David was running an entire clothing store. He loved it. Life went very good for David, and actually Cayce was able to kind of still, they still sent Cayce updates as to how David was doing, how his sister was doing, how Cayce really did love that. Cayce loved to know how the people he served were doing. And rightly so, because you care about these people. You're not doing this for you're not doing it for the thrills that others might try to put on shows for. It really is a care. So Cayce was able to watch the majority of David's life turn out in a great positive way because eventually they took the advice from the Akashic as to how to use the skills and talents and gifts that are being presented in this current life, this current body of form, this current consciousness to help live your best possible life. Now, I'm not saying that not all of your past lives don't contribute. Oh yeah, there's little kernels here and there. I started this video talking about the storms happening in the southern part of the United States and how even in disasters of multiple different kinds, all those little kernels, all those little crumbles, all those little parts of every life we've ever lived can jump into action because they are there. But that doesn't mean that that's what's supposed to drive you from day to day. That doesn't mean that that's the thing you should choose as a career choice. That doesn't mean that that is how you're going to communicate with people and share relationships and share your joy. No, it's not those little crumbles. Oftentimes we have a few very significant lives that are associated with the current life that you're living. And then in the next life, it might be a whole different batch. And a lot of people will refer to this as your lessons. Doesn't this put a little different of a feel on it? That maybe it's not your lessons that you have to learn, other than to start living more authentically with the beautiful energy and influences that are here to serve you to do so, opposed to fighting the energy. I don't see it as lessons. I see it as opportunity. I really do. So there you go. Seeker just asked, is it bad to have lived so many lives? Does it mean we just can't get it? Well, I want to answer that with an experiment. So then you can tell me, Seeker. You can tell me, Shelley. You can tell me, folks, all of you that might be thinking and feeling the same way, as to why do we keep living so many lives? This place actually sucks. What are we not getting right about here? Right? That's how everyone thinks. So let's run an experiment. What if we worked with the energy instead of against it? What if we worked with what has been trying to influence us, and it's there, we know, and see it all as opportunity. Opportunity to practice compassion for self and others, opportunity to live authentically, opportunity to do what really brings us joy, opportunity to love and be loved. So many opportunities. My goodness, this earth must be the earth of opportunity, not lessons. Huh. I don't know. You're gonna have to tell me. I don't know. Try it that way. See what it is. Maybe we'll get into it, Seeker, and maybe that's our cliffhanger. You guys run those experiments, see how it suits you. Put on, you know, I'm gonna leave you with this. This is the best experiment to ever try. And I swear to goodness, I think I just learned it. I had a teacher once, or a mentor, I should say, who repeated to me nonstop, wear the world as a loose garment. So, in the spirit of David Greenwood, the man who knew how to dress everybody, how about we try to wear the world as a loose garment and see all the opportunities that arise out of that? And then we'll discuss again at some point. I love you all so much. Good to see you. Good to be with you. Stay tuned for Edgar Cayce with Reincarnation and his bio, because this will be coming up a lot, folks. Edgar Cayce on Reincarnation. I love you all. Be safe. Send love and light to those here in the States and to yourself. Remember, we can't serve others without serving ourselves. Bye, folks.